You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma stories through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode down in Film Row in Oklahoma City today. And if you're watching the video, you can see a lot of beautiful cars behind us and my guest. Chip Fudge is with me. Absolute pleasure to be in this building, and I can't wait to talk cars with you. But not all about cars, obviously. You know, cars is a huge passion, but about kind of, you know, your business decisions and just kind of the love of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma, I think, in general, that you clearly show, because, you know, a lot of people who've been successful think, I'm going to go move to the beach, right? But the good thing is you're based here, you're rooted here, and that's, you know, clear in the actions that you have in your real estate developments. And I know we've just chatted before about, you know, there's people coming in today that you're hoping to, you know, strike up a conversation with and bring in people and share Oklahoma City, I think, to the outside world, which is, you know, a great thing to do. Some people might think it's not a good thing because they like it the way it is and they don't want anyone coming in from out of state. But no, Oklahoma City has been growing, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But thanks so much for having me down. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. I mean, for me, looking at just kind of what we have around us, I mean, my James Bond just nerding out over the Aston that you have over there, that's in kind of a great green color. And I know green is making a resurgence, or has been trying to make a resurgence in the stuff. But the first time I think I ever saw one of your cars, I used to work at Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club. I think you pulled up in the 350 race car. Okay. The Mustang. And yeah. I was just like, I heard it coming, didn't see it until I think you'd parked up and gone inside. And I drove a golf cart over, and the steering wheel was hanging from the mirror. And I'm like, this is awesome. I love this. And then obviously everyone who knows cars and knows Oklahoma City has seen, you know, people take pictures of you when you're driving around because they think, oh, that's Chip. Nobody else, we don't know anyone else who would drive a beautiful Ferrari classic car around. It's, you know, most people who have these cars, they're in a museum somewhere, right? But I think the great thing that car guys love is to see you driving the cars that you have, and you definitely drive the cars that you have, and the race cars, obviously, you know, that there's a passion there which we love to see, no doubt. But before we get into the car stuff, take us back. I mean, I know you went to Oklahoma State, right? University. Born and raised here as well?
Born in Dallas, Texas. Mm-hmm. At 4 or 5 years old, we moved to California. My parents got divorced, and my mother came back home to her parents' house in Holdenville, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. I was raised primarily by a single mother in my early years, and a grandmother who loved antiques and loved dragging me to old antique shops and trying to make me appreciate or show me the appreciation between something that was well made and the irony is something that was not well made, and this would be in the 60s. And so I've always had a love of history and historical things, and I built model cars as a kid and sort of grew up and continued that model car obsession, only with real cars, and now I get to drive them and run around the racetrack when I get the opportunity.
So I guess, I mean, I'm sure there's some of the things that you think of that you would, you know, the memories from running around with your grandmother is some of the stuff you probably wish you still had, right? Like all the old stuff that back then we didn't think would be worth something today that was cool today, you know, probably wasn't that cool back then.
No question about that. One little story that most people don't know, when my grandparents passed away, the majority of their stuff was sold at an estate sale. Mm-hmm. And at 16 years old, my father had set up a credit line for me of $2,000. And I went to the estate sale and bought as much as I could of my grandparents' estate. The dining room table still sits in my house today here in Oklahoma City. A number of other really fine, interesting pieces that were, you know, part of my childhood growing up. And I think the old buildings that my grandparents had and the appreciation for that certainly came from my grandmother and my grandfather. Mm-hmm. They had some real estate in Seminole, Oklahoma, Holdenville, Oklahoma, and rent houses, and it just seemed like a natural part of growing up was going to collect rent once a month, or going to take care of some maintenance issues on some of the old buildings, and that seemed normal to me growing up.
So you had a great example of entrepreneurship from a very young age then.
I think so, primarily from my grandmother. I also started throwing newspapers at 10 years old. Before that, my parents didn't have a lot of money, and they were starting their own business. And if I wanted to have any money, I had to throw paper out or cut yards or do landscaping as a child. And as a 10-year-old, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and throw Sunday newspapers, which you never let a 10-year-old go out and do that now. And then every afternoon, Monday through Saturday, I would throw the Oklahoma City Times newspaper. We were such a progressive community. We had a morning newspaper and an afternoon newspaper at the time. And it taught me a whole lot about, I had to buy my newspaper from the OPUBCO, or the Daily Oklahoman, and then I had to throw the newspapers, and then I had to show up at the end of the month and collect the money. And sometimes people would move, sometimes people wouldn't pay me. It taught me a whole lot about how to make a living, and I guess I started at a young age doing that.
Yeah, and then, like I said, it progresses into just buying and selling anything that you can get your hands on, and like I said, you start rebuilding, Model Ts or whatever it is. You get into flipping things, right? And then it just kind of grows and snowballs from there.
My best friend in high school and he found this car, which was a 1957 Chevrolet. It had a hole about the size of a bowling ball in the side of it from rust, and we paid $75 for the car. I put up the money, he got it running. We sold it for $250, and we thought we'd slaughtered a fat hog. It was the greatest thing in the whole wide world.
Right.
You fast forward to about 5 years ago, and I had purchased a 1971 Lamborghini, paid $350,000 for it. And it was not for sale, and I was approached by an auction company to sell it, and I said, "Not for sale." And they said, "Well, there has to be a number." And I said, "Okay, $1.2 million." And just to think that once in my life I could sell a car for over $1 million was just flabbergasted. It flabbergasted me. I just couldn't believe it. And we ended up getting $1,150,000 for the car. I dropped my reserve a bit, and I think my buddy and I, the same guy that we bought the $75 Chevy for, we were just as happy to sell the $1 million car as we were the $75 car.
Oh, I can't imagine how that guy feels that you bought it from first.
Yeah.
But in the last 5 years, like, cars have gone nuts. And the prices of things have just gone through the roof, and not just, the special cars, like your everyday, I mean, a Tahoe is like $100,000 now.
Oh,
right?
they have.
It's crazy.
But I tell people that I would starve to death if I had to make my living in the car business. I buy cars and drive cars because I appreciate their beauty. I think they're all works of art. The more odd, the better. Yeah. And if I get any extra money, I typically will buy a new car, a new motorcycle, just because that's where my passion is, where my heart is. But without ever having any intention of making money on them.
Yeah. So back to kind of earlier, you go to Oklahoma State. What do you go to Oklahoma State for? And in that time, were you thinking, was there a time or an opportunity that you didn't really have to go to university, but you went anyway?
Well, there certainly was. If you back up before college, I dropped out of Putnam City High School the middle of my junior year, so I'm a high school dropout. Okay. I go off to the Army, signed up in Uncle Sam's all-volunteer Army. 6 months in, at the time, they would guarantee your field of training and your placement. And I had selected to be a field radio mechanic, which is, I'm technologically illiterate, which was silly as hell for me to do. And then they were going to ship me to Germany, where my brother was stationed, and I thought that was fun. So a couple of months before that, they came and said, well, we can't send you to Germany. We've got too many radio mechanics there. You can go to Japan or Alaska, or you can get out of the Army. I said, okay, I'll get out of the Army. I took my GED and started Oklahoma State with all my friends in my graduating class. I just took a little year and a half detour before I showed up at college. I got a degree in political science. I changed that to pre-law so I could have more philosophy classes. And so I ended up with a minor in philosophy. I am not qualified to do anything in the business world. I find history fascinating, and my goal was to go off to law school. And I come from a long line of lawyers. My grandfather, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, my brother. Everybody was smart enough to get a law degree except me. And my parents sent me to Europe after college, and I came back and was accepted at OCU Law School and decided that wasn't what I wanted to do, and I went to work for my father in his collection business.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, looking back, think of all the things think of obviously the car collection you could have if you did go to Japan, and all the JDM stuff you might have instead of all the stuff you have behind you now.
True.
I mean, there's a couple of you go to Datsun over there, but it could be a lot different, couldn't it? Oh, that's great.
Well, I could have ended up 20 years in the service, or in Alaska. Alaska would have been fun. I love to fly fish, but out of just pure luck, a bit of tenacity, and folks that have helped me along the way, we've had a heck of a run of good luck. It just shocks me. I swore that I would never have more than 10 employees. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 300, 325, and that's not a big deal until it's time to make payroll every month.
Right.
But honestly, it just shocks me. We've had the kind of good fortune that we've had, and I think we happen to be at the right place at the right time. Oklahoma City is such a easy, wonderful place to live, and I think 3 events occurred in my lifetime that were pivotal to the growth of this city. One being the oil boom going bust in '82. The other was the May 3rd tornado that devastated our community, and the final was the Murrah building bombing. And all of those things together, I believe, put us in a point where we realized that nobody was going to come to our rescue. We, as the folks that lived here, civic leaders, business leaders, politicians, felt like we had to come together to make our city better. And I believe the catalyst of those 3 tragic events helped bring us together in a very apolitical way. The business community and the local government community, we want to work together and make things better. In the last 20 years, we've sort of started to drift away from that now. We're starting to become more polarized, like the rest of the country. But out of adversity comes opportunity, and I think, I wasn't smart enough to leave town like everybody else was. We figured out we had to stay here and attempt to make a go of it. And so many like-minded people have done really well with that. Yeah,
and kind of been rewarded by, their loyalty, I guess, to living in Oklahoma City, right?
Yes.
And that kind of just like, we want to make, this is our home, we're going to make it better, and we're going to do whatever we can to make it better. Rather than, like you said, jumping ship and going Houston, Dallas, wherever, or, LA, or wherever the jobs are and the money is.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure 10, 20, 30, even more people that have done that and come back and have families here now.
Yeah.
You know?
My biggest fear, I'd gotten divorced early on in the starting of our business. My biggest fear was that my then ex-wife would take my child and leave. And what followed that was we need to build a community where these children want to stay and thrive, and can stay and thrive. And I think we've been very successful in that regard.
Yeah.
Not only do our kids want to stay and thrive, but so many kids want to come back of my children's generation, and that makes me very proud. I credit Leadership Oklahoma City, the Chamber of Commerce, so many people that and groups that came together to try to make this place a better place. And all of us now are seeing some of the fruits of that labor.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's I love, everyone I tell that I'm friends with from back home. I say, you got to come see me in Oklahoma City. Like, you have a free hotel, you can stay at the house, but you've got to, and they're like, well, why? I'm like, well, you'll figure it out when you get here. Just trust me. And every time they get here, they're like, wow, I had no idea. Because most people don't. Yeah. But Travel Oklahoma and Visit OKC and, Leadership Oklahoma City, and they're doing a great job of promoting not just Oklahoma City, but the state in general. But you mentioned your own business. So you went to work for Dad at the collection stuff.
Yes.
How long were you there before you decided to go out on your own?
Well, so I went to work there in between part of my stint of dropping out of high school and going to college, along with the Army. My parents had pretty much retired, and I was running the business when I was 27, 28 years old. And my parents had gone off to South Padre Island and were living down there, and I was running the business. And we had oil boom gone bust, and things were a bit of a challenge. And my parents and I had a bit of a falling out. I left and started my own company. 4 or 5 years later, I ended up buying their company out, and took that. And we still have that company today, as a matter of fact. A small collection agency, 25, 35 employees, but it's been in business since 1967 and still does quite well. I'm ADD, so I ramble a bunch. So tell me what the question was.
We've got
we'll
time.
Start over.
Yeah, just kind of the process of so your parents retire, you buy them out, eventually kind of you own the business, and then you're 27, 28, 29 years old with multiple businesses at the time, right? You have the collections agency, and then you start your own.
Actually, we had our claims business, which I'd started, and then I bought the collection agency back from my parents. But during that time, late 80s, early 90s, real estate was still very, very inexpensive, and because roughly after the oil boom went bust, 35 to 40% of the people left or walked away from their homes because they were upside down. And we started buying small rent houses and then apartment houses over in Jefferson Park and historic homes in Crestwood, that type of stuff. And we'd buy as many as we could and try to get them rented, or sometimes we'd flip them. And when the amount of debt felt like it was too much, I had to sell a few to try to make up for some things. And I'll never forget, I paid $15,000 for a house over in Crestwood, and then I sold it for $55,000 about 5 years later, and thought I'd just killed it. And then a few years ago, it sold for $250,000. So I wasn't smart enough to hold on to all of these things, but also didn't have the cash flow and the liberty to do so. I've got a buddy named Mike Dillard, and I say this all the time. He says, you never go broke making a little profit. And so if I can make a little money, I'll do that and go on down the road. And the smarter money might have held on, but I'm because I saw so many of the best and the brightest and the wealthiest in this community go broke during the oil boom when it went broke. I've always been incredibly conservative for my debt to equity ratio. I think it served me well. I probably could have, if I'd have. I also admire people like Aubrey McClendon, who had the guts to risk it all over and over and over again, and I'm just not made that way. Probably could, if things would have fallen right, we could have been a lot more successful. But I'm not starving to death and not missing any meals, so I'm happy where we are. Yeah.
And so, what led to, I guess, starting the claims? It was claims, right? Insurance.
It was claims business.
Okay, so what led to starting that?
I had a good friend, we did work for Southwestern Bell for their billing and residential service collection work, and they were really happy with us. And the man that ran the claims organization for Southwestern Bell was referred to us by the business office and said, this group does a good job, you got to go talk to them. And This was right at divestiture. The phone companies were being divided up. They were not able to go to the Corporation Commission and just get a rate increase. They had to become more of a private organization than a public organization. And Harry Robertson came to me and said, we've got this book of business that if we hire outside attorneys, they charge us on an hourly basis, and it costs too much money for them to do that. And if our in-house people aren't interested in this, and we thought perhaps a collection agency type format might work. And we devoted 2 or 3 different employees to the process, learned about what creates liability when people are digging and damaging underground cables.
Yeah.
I'm not real clever, but I would look at what a hospital bill would generate on our collection agency side from a revenue standpoint, and I looked at what the telecom revenue was generating. And collecting money from insurance companies is a whole lot easier than collecting money from people that don't have any money. It almost seems like rocket science almost, but it not really. And so I said, I want more of that. And we built a program over the next year with Southwestern Bell, and ended up with Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, most of the Southwestern Bell territory. Right. And then our big break came when AT&T wanted to take a look at us. And I piled my whole family into the car and drove to Denver. That's where their claims office was. Yeah. We were going to go on vacation, and I was going to go knock on their door and have a visit with them. And after that meeting with all my kids and wife sitting in the car, he said, we'll give you a try. Yeah. And they gave us a try, and within a year we had a national contract with AT&T.
Amazing.
AT&T introduced us to GTE, which was the forerunner for Verizon. Within another 6 to 9 months, GTE came on board. They were going to initially give us 25% of the country. We said, that would be great. We're happy to start in Florida and work on that. Yeah. He called me back and said, got a little problem. I've got to cut more people, and can you take the whole country? And I said, sure. And I had 25 employees at the time, and there's no way in hell we could handle that business. But I recognized an opportunity, and it was all hands on deck, and we ended up swallowing the whole country for GTE. So we had GTE, AT&T, Southwestern Bell, and that was sort of the start of where we were going. At one point in the telecom world, we estimated that we had a 42% market share of the U.S. nationally, with Bell South and U.S. West and AT&T and some of the other people, and that's effectively how we built our business.
God, it's amazing. Yeah,
and I'm as amazed as anybody.
Right. Yeah, but there's a lot. I mean, the thing that's reoccurring from when I sit down with successful business men and women on this podcast is impeccable timing, hard work, and a little bit of luck. But you've got to have the other. You've got to have the hard work. You can't, you just like the triangle, right? You can't do it all. You've got to have, you can't do one without the other. You've got to have that hard work, because you had to be in a position to take that opportunity, right? And without the hard work of getting there, you wouldn't have been in that position.
And to have the cash to do so,
right?
We had a little bit of cash to throw at our growth, and the banks starting to loan us some money as the numbers looked right. I tell people that, how do you get so successful? Well, if you're independently employed, you work for yourself, you work 24/7. Every waking moment, you are trying to figure out how you're going to improve what you've got. And the other thing that I share with folks is you have to have a sense of urgency on every single thing that you do. And if you have those two things, that you're willing to accept the working all the time, and you have a sense of urgency, this country, this state, great opportunity with our rule of law, our relatively low tax situation. The sky's the limit, in my opinion. Poor boy, paper boy, high school dropout. Now with $1 million a month payroll, it's still possible in this country, in this state.
Right. Yeah, it's. I mean, from my perspective, from an immigrant's perspective, the American dream is still real. right? A lot of people, don't think that. And I'm like, well, no, I will tell you until like I lose my voice that it's real, because I believe in it, and I'm part of that. Like, you ask any immigrant, they'll tell you the same thing. But it's not just immigrants as well. I think immigrants probably see the value in it because they know what's in their home country, right? But like yourself, you grew up here, you worked very hard from a young age and saw that kind of opportunity. And like I said, we're not stopping anytime soon, right? You got meetings today. You're still moving, like
I'm
there's
old,
still
but
things
I'm
you
not
want to
dead.
do. Yeah, there's still things you want to do. And then if you're anything like me, and golf's one of my big passions. For me, it's like, where can I go play golf? For you, it's probably like, where can I go race next, right? What where can we put the car on a plane or on a truck and go somewhere and race it? Which I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit. But so the business kicks off. You kind of like you've kind of found. I guess you got so much, things to focus on with the growth of the business at that time, and you're getting employees in, just to help run things. So it sounds like the real estate side of things was just kind of, it was a smart hobby to do, right? Jonah, from listening to your story with your background, your grandparents having rentals, and it was something that you're familiar with. It's a great investment. It also sounds like you really enjoyed it too.
I do really enjoy it, but there was a huge method to my madness.
Mm-hmm.
When Automobile Alley was first coming online, the Auto Alley board, the Salyers, and the Pref Takes, and just so many people. My architect friend Rand Elliott, and they brought together and figured out the business model of getting the properties listed on the historic register and sharing how you go about getting state and federal tax credits for the restoration of property. And at the end of the day, they created a model where you put $1 million in a building, you get a 20% tax credit from the state, 20% tax credit from the feds, and if you donate the facade of the building so that it stays that way for the rest of its life, you get a 10 to 13% deduction. So you're on $1 million worth of investment in the right building, you could come up with $500,000 worth of tax credits, which is a huge driver.
Yeah.
And for us, our core business was making money, and so it seemed to go hand in glove or hand in hand to be able to make money in the claims business and offset that and build a real estate portfolio with the tax credits.
Yeah.
And there are so many great opportunities out there. The opportunity zones, state and federal tax credits, so many things that if most people that are in the real estate business have to take the tax credits and sell them so that they can fund the more expensive costs of restoring a historic building. And in our world, we didn't sell anything because we needed to offset the income. And so to me, they seem to go very much hand in hand.
And just kind of, and listening to you talk, just the passion that you have as well for just, your where you live and your home and wanting to improve that, for future generations. That then takes, you're not just buying rent houses and buildings just to turn a profit. That's kind of a byproduct, obviously, and it helps progress and buy the next one. But, it's more about kind of how can we make this better? What tenant can we get in here that's not just gonna, ruin a local small business, but it's actually going to be a restaurant, or it's going to be, there's another thing, like, your involvement in Film Row, obviously where we're sat today. I'm sure Film Row back in the day was, the story you told about this building, it was falling apart, right? This was one of many buildings down here in this area, which now, Film Row is a destination for people to come and hang out, and whether it's going to, have a beer or whatever it is, there's plenty of business going on down here.
There certainly is.
Why, I guess, did you choose to focus on Film Row as well as obviously Automobile Alley, but Film Row seems to be the most recent one?
There's so many things I want to say in response. So people come to me with business deals all the time, and some of them are brilliant. You can do mini storages, you can do this brand new tip-up building. I could give a shit about restoring or putting together a new building to make money. if I really want to make money, make the most money possible, I would focus what we do across the street of the claims business. But I really enjoy saving and restoring old buildings, and that's sort of my passion in saving and restoring old cars.
Yeah.
On Film Row, David Wanzer, now a very successful developer, at one time was an architect right out of school, came to me with his vision that he wanted to buy the Film Exchange building down the street and turn it into condos. And within a couple of months of that, my friend Pat Gallagher, Doug Parr, came to me and said, there's this really cool strip of buildings over here on Sheridan you need to go take a look at. And when both of them came together and I started looking at what the history of this area was, it was one of only 2 surviving film exchange districts in the U.S., the other being in Kansas City.
Really?
I had sold the Cameron building over on Classen and had a little 1031 money from the profits that we'd made on it. And so I jumped off and started buying property along here. And David Wanzer was our architect, and he walked us through all the tax credit programs. And David and his Pivot group, those guys have just killed it here in town, buying old properties and doing that. But we started in the 500 block of Sheridan, and there were a ton of homeless people down here. We bought the Film Exchange building, finally got that deal bought buildings. I've only been able to acquire property on the south side of Sheridan. I've tried my dead level best to buy property on the north side, but we owned almost every piece of property between the 500 block and the 800 block of Sheridan on the south side.
Yeah.
I'm rambling and babbling and on, but we had some interesting times down here. We, had no idea what it was going to be like dealing with the homeless population. And the mayor asked me to be on Mick Cornett asked me to be on the homeless task force, and so I got to learn and know a little bit about that because it was Tom Jones across the street at the homeless shelter and me and just a few other smattering businesses that were still down here. Jeff McKenzie had the T-shirt shop, was the Lone Ranger all by himself, and everything else was boarded up and shut down. And we just started buying these properties because I thought they were so unbelievably cool. And we would remodel one at the end of the street, and we'd work our way down here toward the Hart building and then these properties. And what we learned is that every time we would finish a building and get tenants moved into it, the homeless would sort of move farther to the west. And that happened all the way until we effectively did the Hart building and then these 2 buildings, and we're right across the street. And I'm not making any characteristics or casting any aspersions toward the homeless, but they didn't seem to want to be around an area that was being where people were living and it was being regentrified. There were some tough times. One of the scariest part is my realtor took me across the street to what I will call a currently unnamed building that has been completely put back together. And rumor had it was that it was a brothel and a massage parlor, and my realtor and I walked in. There wasn't supposed to be anybody in there. Very dark, lots of little cubby holes with massage tables on it. We walked to the back of the building, and I was with my realtor and good friend Jane O'Toole at the time, and we walk in this back room, and there's a wall full of 8 to 10 inch monitors with cameras showing every single room. A guy jumps up out of bed, grabs his gun, and holds his gun on us. And, that was an interesting thing. And, we both backed up and said, we were supposed to be here. We thought the place was vacant. We weren't criminals or homeless breaking in. And long story short, I didn't get the building. A funny aside is when I went home that evening, I said, honey, tried to buy a brothel today and almost got shot.
Yeah, the conversation over dinner is a little different, isn't it? Yeah. What do you do at work today, honey? Well, yeah, almost died.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Those are just some of the fun experiences we've had down here.
Yeah. No, but it's this district in this area. It's still growing. I'm sure it looks a lot better now than what it did today. And funny fact for you, the first ever podcast episode I ever did was in Desmond Mason's loft across the street.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. First one I ever did.
And so that was my building.
Okay.
Before I sold it to Meg Salyer, and then Meg leased it to Desmond.
Yeah. That was 4 years ago. It was crazy.
Did you go out on the back patio of Desmond's place?
No, did I go? Yeah, I did. Yeah. Because we recorded in the loft up top, and then we looked out.
And was the awning on top?
Not yet. I don't think so.
So, and they may have taken it down at the time, but in the 70s, they put an aluminum awning on the front of that building. The building is a lovely blue and gray stucco on the front, and we took off the awning off the front and mounted it as a cover over the back patio on top of the behind the
Which
apartment.
is a better place to put it.
Yeah, we thought so too.
Yeah. Obviously, we're sat in a garage full of amazing cars. Where does the passion for cars start for you? I say start. It starts early on, obviously, but like, where is there a moment? Is there a car that you see? Like, is there a poster on the wall? Kind of like the Countach that most people talk about. Or
I remember as a 4 or 5 year old, my real father for Christmas bringing home an electronic car, and we sort of put it together. It was probably about 2 feet long, and I got to drive it around with the full wire, no Bluetooth back in the day. And that's my earliest memory of a car. My father was a photographer, and so he would go and photograph street races and Grand Prix in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And he would drag me around to these things, and I can only imagine the type of cars that I saw. I don't even, I have no recollection, but I'm sure Maseratis and Ferraris and all of the sports cars of the 60s that are
greatest
so unbelievably
sound in the world.
Just incredible. So I always loved playing with cars, building model cars. All of that sort of came together. I said earlier I was a paper boy, and when my parents moved out far northwest Oklahoma City, my brother and I bought a $350 Honda motorcycle so that we could throw our papers on. I wasn't old enough to drive it, so he would drive it, and I would sit on back and throw the newspapers, and that's how we made our money. And then 6 months later, I was 14, I could have my own motorcycle, and we saved up enough money. We traded in the Honda and bought 2 Kawasaki's, and so since I was 13 and a half, I have always had a motorcycle, at least one.
Right.
And the motorcycles just sort of progressed into car things, and we didn't have cell phones or internet, and for us the car meant freedom, chasing girls and that kind of stuff, and I think it still gives me that kind of feeling, the freedom and ability to go. And I love cars.
Well, what was that when you start earning money? You have your own business. You're starting to climb that ladder, right? You're getting to a point where business is growing. You're having a great time. You can afford to spend money on things you probably never thought you could spend it. Growing up. What was that first big purchase?
Oh gosh.
In the car, related to cars.
In the car world.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times when we were building our business, I would. And before, I would buy MGBs, pay $1,000 for them, clean them up, get them running, sell them for $2,500 to $3,000. When we started our business, I think I sold 3 MGs to help fund the start of our business. The first, I think, important, expensive car I bought was a 1975 Porsche 911, and I paid $4,500 for it, and that was a whole bunch of money in, I guess, 1988, 89, because we just started the business and started making a little bit of money, and so I bought that, and it sort of progressed, and your taste changed a little bit. I had a lot of American Iron, Camaros and Mustangs and Pontiac Trans Ams in the early part of the collection. And then they've sort of morphed into now, Ferraris and Aston Martins and, more exotic and other cars. In between there, I had a pretty good sized motorcycle collection, about 35, 40 motorcycles. And they've sort of dwindled through the years. I sold half a dozen last month in Las Vegas. I'm down to 4 or 5 at this point, I think, because I just spend more time in the cars these days than I am in the motorcycles. But
I'm sure your wife and your family appreciate you going out in the cars more than the bikes now as well, right? With as many people that are texting and driving on the road, it's much better to go out in a car than it is in a bike. I know it is. COVID was horrible, though. I bought 4 or 5 motorcycles during COVID and have not driven any of them. I keep thinking someday I will. I have a really good friend named Mark Dillon who owns that 1936 Indian there. And one of the, that's not my motorcycle, but I've got a 1929 Excelsior Henderson, which is a very rare motorcycle across the way. And I told him I'd sold all the other bikes, and he said, "You didn't sell the Henderson, did you?" And I said, "No." And he said, he's moving back here someday soon. And he said, "We have a pact. We're going to get both those running and ride around just like we used to when we were in our 30s. That's awesome.
So that's our goal.
Yeah. When do you just kind of get bored of driving on the road and think, you know what, I'm going to go to a racetrack?
No.
Where does the racing come in?
I had a friend that had done a race in Mexico. And he said, "Chip, you like cars? I've got a car for you, $25,000. You can buy this car and take it down to Mexico, and we'll run this race. It's great fun." Showed me a film that Pink Floyd had done about the race, and I thought, this is great.
Sold.
I'm going to drive cars around Mexico. We're going to have margaritas at night, and this is going to be just great fun. Great. And I got down there and I realized that these are real race car drivers and these are real race cars and I'm going to die. And, there were Ferrari cars, or Ferrari team with a half a dozen mechanics. Mercedes sent 3 of their cars over with 25 support personnel, and I've got a Suburban with a trailer with a broken down 54 Corvette on the back of it, and we had a really good time. Car caught on fire the first day, and we didn't burn up or die. We finished the race, which was a feat in itself, and I thought, I really like this. And the next year I went to Grand Prix driving school and then decided to go back down to Mexico in the same car, much more prepared, both personally and the car. And we ended up finishing second in class by a whole lot of luck. And I raced in Mexico. That was 2000, and I've done that race 10 or 11 times. And then there's another smaller race that's only 1,200 miles, and I've done that one 10 or 11 times as well. So
mostly endurance racing.
It is an endurance race, yes.
Got you. Is that kind of the meat of what the races that you do, or just the endurance race rather than the...
No, that was just how I started.
Okay.
And I do 1 or 2 of those a year. Next month I go off to Chihuahua to do that race. Most of the races we do now are on-road courses.
Okay.
Every now and then we'll do a race like the Long Beach Grand Prix, where we're actually on the street as a support race for the Indy cars. Most people have 1 or 2 race cars. I think I've got 15 or 16 at this point, and my wife and I have had a discussion. That's probably too many. And I'm this arbitrary line in the sand. I have a half a dozen cars on the West Coast, so we won't have to tow them out there. But I'm going to keep my goal right now, if I can get there, is 3 race cars in Oklahoma, 3 race cars in Phoenix, and 3 race cars in California. And last year I probably ran 12 race weekends a year, which was a lot. I'm normally driving 2 to 4 cars at each event.
And a lot of people probably don't realize that sometimes it's not the drive, it's the car that gets you in the race or the event, right?
They could care less about me.
Right, yeah. So the good thing is, if your wife's interested, you say, hey, we've been invited, to this, or the car has been invited to this race. Do you want to go spend the weekend? And then it becomes a bigger issue. It's not just you going away with the lads.
They want the Ferrari that's one of 8, or they want the Bizzarini that's the only one in the U.S. being raced right now.
Right.
They could care less, Yeah. I could be that stuffed gorilla over in the corner in the car. They could care less. They just want to have the car on the track.
Yeah. Have you been kind of taking cars over to Europe and done the European? Kind of the ones I'm thinking of is like Spa 24 Hours or any of the historic. Goodwood would be amazing.
Silverton.
What I'm thinking of is like classic Monaco race. Like the classic races are great, aren't they? And they're everywhere.
Yes. I have 2 or 3 cars that qualify for that.
Okay.
I have not done the Mille Miglia, which the Ferrari back there in the corner qualifies for that.
Yeah.
Last year, or 2019, before COVID, we did an ice race that Ferdinand Porsche's grandson sponsored in Austria.
Yeah.
And that was unbelievably fun. A buddy that I raced with in Mexico invited me over, and we drove a circuit on ice with studded tires.
Amazing.
There was another class that actually pulled skiers behind the cars, which I thought was totally nuts.
Yeah.
Although in practice, I did pull a skier to see what it was like. And out of 45 cars, we ended up qualifying 17th. And I thought that was pretty good, since I had never sat in the car until that morning. And then my buddy went out in his car, thank goodness, and ran it right into a side of an ice wall, and we were done for the weekend, but had a great time drinking schnapps and hanging out in Austria.
On ice. Yeah.
On ice.
Is that GP ice race? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay, because I saw something recently on social media that I guess it was like maybe last month they must have done something, and it was
they did it again.
Because I think the thing I saw was they had like it was Max Verstappen was out there in his Red Bull car.
Yeah.
I was like, that's kind of cool. Nice.
I think.
And multiple other cars. They had a GT4 RS obviously out there for Porsche and all the other,
Yeah, an amazing event.
Yeah.
And we ended up, if you can imagine, 15 to 20,000 fans at night, rock and roll music blaring,
amazing.
Zipping around this ice course. 2 cars at a time. It's so much fun. It's a blast.
Those are the days you're like, this is why I love cars, right?
Yes.
This is why I want to do what I do. I want to come back here. But you mentioned, Goodwood. I haven't been to Goodwood. Lived in the UK obviously for 21 years and still never went to it. But a friend of mine is kind of the same as me, loves cars. He's in the car industry back home and he gets to go. But he enjoys going to the Revival instead of Goodwood, the week after, I believe they have the classic Revival where everybody dresses up in period clothing, and I think that's more your scene, right?
It is much more my scene. We've got a couple of cars that have actually run there and have qualified. I have not had the opportunity to get them back over there to do that yet.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
We've got a couple of Chevrons and a Sunbeam Monster Tiger that ran Goodwood in 08, and but that's a goal. I'm trying to negotiate with my wife if the 9 that I keep would just be in the U.S. and I send 2 over to the UK or Europe to race over there.
Have you thought about doing kind of any of the they do the Peking to Paris, right? Like in a classic, Safari Porsche or whatever it is. Like, have you ever thought about doing stuff like that?
We actually have a car that qualifies back there for it. My buddy Hayden Grondike and I. Before COVID and before he got married, we had a plan that I was going to pay for the Peking Paris, and we applied, and he was going to provide the car, which I think I got the better end of the deal because the cars are torn up at the end of that deal. And we were going to do Peking Paris, but we ended up being waitlisted, and then we didn't get in. And so he has reapplied. Very fortunally, he's gotten married since then, and so I've been booted from the from the partnership. Yes. And Hayden is and his dad too. They're incredible cars, great car guys.
Is that Enid, right?
Yes,
they're from Enid family, right?
They're in Enid, Grondike Transportation. Serious car guys, and their team that takes care of their cars. We hang out together, and Yeah, we've had great fun together.
Yeah. I mean, we could sit here for 4 hours and talk about cars. We could sit here and talk about just one of the cars that you have in this garage. So for the listeners in general, I think we'll take a little walk and talk later, and we can record that separately, and I'll send you a link to that for people who want to check out the cars that are here right now. But coming kind of back to kind of circle back to kind of your involvement in Oklahoma City, with all, obviously, you get involved in the real estate stuff, and you mentioned you were on a board. The Mayor Mick Cornett asked you to be on one of the boards, and quickly enough, right, your name kind of gets out there, and people start wanting you to come to other boards and get involved with other stuff. And I know we chatted previously, you're on the board for the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, which for this podcast is our main sponsor. They're incredible to work with, and there's just people, you just got to go to the building, because it's a fabulous building, and if you getting married anytime soon, I would recommend getting married there, because they do great weddings. But kind of what drew you, I guess, to wanting to be involved with the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, and just kind of your impact while you were on the board there?
Well, to me, if you're selected to be a member of the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, that is the highest honor that you, in my opinion, that you can reach in the state of Oklahoma. It's the best and the brightest of us that have created a legacy for the state of Oklahoma, and I just love so much everything that they do over there. If you back up a little bit, when the building first came on the market, Bill Cameron, who's a buddy of mine, had acquired the building. And I called Bill and said, "Bill, I'd really like to buy that building for our headquarters."
Yeah.
He said, "Chip, there are bigger forces in play than me and you on this deal." And I said, "Go on."
Who could that possibly be?
Yeah. He said, "Mr. Gaylord and Mr. Pickens have decided to buy it, and that's where the Oklahoma Hall of Fame is going." I said, "Well, there is no way I can compete with either of those two guys, and I certainly understand that. I think this is grand."
Right.
But that, instead of the Hart Building, was my vision to be the headquarters of our company. So
would have been a great headquarters.
It would have been
it's a great
headquarters, but unbelievably proud of what they put together and how it's put together, and the events there, and just everybody that is associated with it, first class, and how they bring board members in, how you're kept up to breast on everything that they're doing. Great programs for kids, great programs for young adults, great programs for old folks like me, and it's just an amazing organization. I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, I'm on the Second Century board this year. I got onto it this year. Excited to just exactly what you said, just kind of the kids programs and the events that we're going to have, and the outreach events that we're going to have, and we're bringing Hall of Famers back in to do speaking engagements and stuff. It's fascinating to listen to people's stories, and a lot of people don't know. I encourage people to just look at who is in the Hall of Fame, and then to deep dive into that person and figure out why they are in there, because the amount of incredible human beings we have in this state, I mean, that's just a short list, right? I mean, there's plenty others, but those are the people who've been selected, and there's going to be many more to come over the years. But they're a great sponsor, and it's been a pleasure to be involved with them. And being on the board side, I get to see exactly what you did, right? The side that the decisions that are made, the impacts that you're having, and it's even just like you said, the kids who are just running through their free school programs they get on a day out. It's an honor to be a part of it, and hopefully it continues for a very long time.
Well, and you mentioned taking a deep dive at looking at some of the historic figures that have made this state. We are unbelievably lucky, in my opinion. The combination of our Indian heritage, along with the land-run heritage that we have. And I have a theory about Oklahoma with zero basis in fact, but this is a theory, and I've got to share it. But to come to this country initially, you had to be a risk taker. You had to jump on a boat and sail from Europe or the Caribbean or somewhere to get to this country. Fast forward another 150 years later, a country made of risk takers peels off and comes to Oklahoma to make a land run. And so from my perspective, you have the risk takers of the risk takers genetically, and you get that along with the great heritage that we have from the Indians that were moved here, all the dramatically different types of tribes that were moved here. I think we have an entrepreneurial spirit, an artistic spirit, a music spirit of this melting pot that from a per capita standpoint, I think we have a stronger per capita entrepreneur, artist, both oil and paper medium to musical artists to actors and actresses. If you look at, I hold up the Flaming Lips as being, we had worldwide success. Wayne still lives here, and the boys still live here in Oklahoma. You've got Blake Shelton, who has won more voice programs than anybody else. A number of companies that are headquartered here nationally. There's no reason for us to be able to have done that. Our little company, we compete coast to coast because the rule of law is strong, the Chamber of Commerce and the public-private combination is really conducive to allowing that to happen. And, we talked earlier about, we're not the greatest kept secret anymore. I think we were for a long time, and that's my silly theory about why we've had the success here that we've had, both locally and nationally.
Yeah, and it's that little chip on your shoulder, isn't it? It's just like
no pun intended.
No pun intended. Yeah, exactly right. And that was not intended. Hilarious. That was not intended. It is though. It's just that like. Well, we're not going to leave. We're going to do it here. We're going to show you how we can do it. I'm going to show you why we can do it here and the things that we can do. And, you mentioned people who are headquartered here. There's many. I mean, the one that comes to mind straight away is Paycom, obviously with the recent acquisition taking the name of the stadium and the things that they continue to do. I mean, it's incredible what they've done and continue to do. And, that they could have gone anywhere, but they've decided to build out, and they keep adding on to their headquarters of the Turnpike. Every time I drive by, I'm like, that's a new part of it.
The Love family has done incredibly well. Sonic Industries have done incredibly well. Oil and gas technology, we're a mecca for that. Just a number of really great, national and international entrepreneurial companies from Oklahoma.
Yeah. Finishing up, what's kind of coming to stuff that you're working on right now? I did see that you guys have got the old Gabriella's building, right?
We have.
Exciting news there. I mean, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but what is the plan on that or stuff that you're working on at the moment that you're really excited about?
Well, we live in northeast Oklahoma City at Lake Aluma. I am very, very bullish on real estate in northeast Oklahoma City. Gabriella's sort of made a big splash. I've been trying to buy that place buy the real estate for 4 or 5 years. Gabriella's, the restaurant, has had a really successful run there.
Amazing place.
Amazing place.
So
and it is crib style Italian food that you could only get if you drove to Cribs and went to Pete's Place or Isle of Capri, and so they've had a very successful run there. The building probably wouldn't have been up for sale if they hadn't decided to move, and they're moving to Edmond to a new location. And I've got 4 or 5 restaurants at this point, and we're trying to figure out if we put one of our concepts in there, or whether we come up with a new concept, or whether we rent it to somebody else. And there's 2 really nice historic pieces of historic property, one small bungalow, and then the Gabriella space itself. And honestly, I'm not sure what we're going to do with it, but we're going to figure it out. Another thing that has really not hit the paper yet is we closed last Monday on an 8,000 square foot 1935 mansion. When we finish with it, it'll have 7 or 8 bedrooms on 7 acres with a pool and a pond and a beautiful stable and silo. And we think if I can't get my wife to move there, we think it will make a very nice high-end Airbnb, perhaps a bed and breakfast someday, or perhaps even a small hotel event center. And so we are so excited about that project as well.
Yeah.
It's called El Sueño at this point. Our lifelong friend Bill Gumerson remodeled the place about 22 years ago, and just did a fabulous job. And he has such an eye. My ADD's kicking in, so I missing people like Bill Gumerson and Mike McAuliffe and so many others that we lost during COVID. Mark Ruffin would be another, that have had such a huge impact on this community, and both personally and for our community, big losses. I just felt like I had to pay homage to those guys, because they all were part of helping me be who I am.
Mr. Holloway too.
Who?
Mr. Holloway.
Yeah, Pete Holloway. Another, and I know there's others I probably missed. I grew. The other three were really close to our family, and but I think Oklahoma City's northeast part of town is an untapped, beautiful, beautiful rolling hills area, and sort of like how we thought Film Row was when we first came down here. We think that there's starting to be enough synergy that we think we can make a go of a few things in northeast Oklahoma City. And so that's where we're buying real estate today.
So if you live in that area and you want to sell,
please
come on down. Last question. Wade, a mutual friend of ours, Wade Towell, wanted me to ask you about the Young Presidents Organization. He said, ask him about that. He's got great stories and he's very passionate about it. So
I am very passionate about YPO. Mike Samus and Bill Cameron asked me to join, I guess, in 1994, 1995. I thought they must have been kidding at the time, because I called it the PF Flyer Club. They run faster and jump higher. And it's sort of like the Groucho Marx thing. I'm not sure I want to be a member of any club that would want me as a member. We got involved, and one thing led to another, and we ended up being greatly involved in YPO and now YPO Gold. It's given us the opportunity to effectively build our business. I said earlier that I've got a political science degree with a minor in philosophy. I'm qualified to do nothing, but through YPO, I was able to do a continuing education program for a year at Northwestern University. I spent 2 or 3 weeks at Harvard doing their stuff, the London School of Business, and doing those programs through YPO really gave us the skill set to scale like we have been. When people ask me, tell me something good about YPO, I say, well, it built my business, it saved my marriage, and it raised my children. So I can't give any more higher accolades than that. I probably could have made $1 billion if I chose to ignore my wife and children and focus totally on business. And the great thing about YPO is that it gives you a really good work-life balance. And some of the opportunities that we've had, got to land on an aircraft carrier only in YPO. I was on Madonna's estate in England skeet shooting, and I'm a very poor skeet shooter. Found out my wife is a very good one, so I shouldn't piss her off. and all the while there's helicopters flying over trying to take pictures of us like we might be somebody. And so little opportunities like that. I was on a racetrack at the Bahrain Formula One circuit with Jackie Stewart all through YPO, and it is just amazing. How does a poor boy from Oklahoma that started throwing newspapers and drops out of high school ended up at Madonna's estate shooting skeet or trying to.
Oh, it's great.
I'm a big fan of YPO. I'm very proud that my son is a member. Our CEO, Richard Cook, is also a member now, and I'm very proud of it.
Awesome. Well, Chip, thanks so much for spending an hour telling some stories. I know there's a million more we could tell, and maybe we'll get to do this another day when the car collections maybe change a little bit, or maybe even bigger. Who knows? We'll see what your wife says. But thanks so much for spending some time telling some stories, and appreciate what you do for the city, and continue to do for continue to. God, I can't speak right now. Appreciate you and appreciate what you continue to do for the city. Because it's a better place because of people like yourself and the other guys that you mentioned that have come before, and the mentors that you've had, and it's like you said, you could have been ignored your wife and kids and made $1 billion and probably been miserable and be somewhere else, right? But this is your home. It's clear that this is your home, and it's great to see. And we're not done yet, right? You're still going, still
not
busy.
Not done yet.
Mine's still moving. You still got projects going. Excited to see what Gabrielle's is going to be, and other projects that come in the future. So
I tell people I'm going to be rich if I don't go broke first.
Exactly. For people listening, I'll put all the links in the description to Chip's businesses, and we will catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you, Mike.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma stories through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.